Well guys, I finally got around to getting one of these Kershaw made Emersons. And I wanted to do it because it's one of those things where these are a knife that always come very highly recommended to people. And as much as I don't have interest in the knife, I kind of felt like I had to get it for the channel so that I would have a benchmark to compare. And also just to be able to kind of answer those questions. I hate to say I bought a knife for you guys, but I kind of did because I really don't have much interest in them. You know, I never much liked the Emerson designs. I kind of, never really caught my fancy, to be honest. And so I've always I thought about buying one of these, but I finally decided to buy one. Kind of glad I did, kind of not glad I did, but we'll talk about that. So this is the CQC. I think it's the 4K XL. So it's the extra large version with the 4-inch blade. It's spear point, by the way. And we'll open this bad boy up. Take a look. Had to get a goddamn aerial photo to get this thing in there. So you're talking about one big, super heavy knife here, guys. Get my cute little lanyard bead in there as well. So as I mentioned, it's a 4-inch 8CR14 MOV spear point blade with the Emerson wave opener. It's got G10 handle scale on one side, stainless on the other. Pocket clip carries not the deepest on the earth, but you obviously, if it is going to be used as a defensive knife, you do want something to grab a hold of there. It's a frame lock, and I'm not crazy about the lockup on this. You can see that frame lock kind of doesn't go over a ton. So I'd be worried if you were using gloves or something like that, this might not lock up the best. So it is a little, not the best lockup on a knife. I'm a little leery about it, but I could live with it, because I don't do any weird knife ninjutsu that would require me using it in a way where the lock would fail anyway. So what I don't like about this knife, we'll get into, is number one, very difficult to deploy. It's very gritty. It takes a lot of work to come past because there's a detent that is in the frame that settles into that. Very difficult to overcome that detent and get the knife to deploy smoothly. It deploys really good with the wave. I was gonna set up some video and do it, guys, but you know what? There's like 1,000 videos of the wave opener. You don't need to see my fat ass pulling out a pocket knife for 10 minutes. So you're gonna take my word for it. It works. It works. If you want to see it, there's tons of videos out there, tons of Emerson videos, and thousands of videos on these knives that'll show it to you. It's good. It works. It works. It's pretty consistent, and no issues with that. This, thumb disc, though, I'm not a big fan of. It's just really rough on your fingers. You can kind of see where already I'm getting a bit of a callus there on my thumb just from working this, which you shouldn't. And ergonomic wise, it's also very difficult to open because as you grip the knife, you have to be very cognizant, because this is where that detent is. You have to be very cognizant that you're not holding the knife like this when you're trying to flip it open, because you're actually adding more pressure to the detent to hold the blade in. So you have to be very careful how you hold it, which makes it kind of difficult to deploy because, as you can see, when it comes to real estate, there's not a ton you can get a hold of here because this frame lock is so gigantic. This knife really should have been a liner lock, to be honest, because, normally you would want to grab the knife and get as much purchase as you can on it, for friction, and especially seeing this is slick because it's stainless, you have very little to grab a hold of. You have to hold the knife kind of back like this, and then getting a good deployment, and I just don't have enough thumb to get this thing to flick open without really flicking my wrist, which I don't like. So deployment, this guy gets an F. I'd give it an A with the wave opening, but for the thumb disc, I give it an F. It's really tough to deploy. I tried loosening up the pivot, but even if you loosen it a quarter of a turn, it develops a lot of blade play. So pretty much I have this set at the loosest I can set it without introducing blade play to it. The screws are all Phillips head, which I don't like because they will, if you have a bad day, can strip those out pretty easy. The pivot is a flathead, which you can see I've already kind of dug that out a little bit. I kind of in a hurry just grabbed a screwdriver that wasn't really the perfect size for it, and it came out, and you can see where it kind of did a little bit of damage there already. But yeah, it's yeah. So it also looks like, what is that, like partial stonewash, like stonewash on the one grind but not on the top, kind of goofy there. Why not just stonewash the whole thing? Came very, very sharp out of the box, which is that's another thing too, guys. When you're holding this, and it's got a great hand feel. I'll give them that. Ergonomics wise, great hand feel. It's got that really nice thumb ramp. Choil's great, really good for, you know, gloved hands. But if you go to release that frame lock, once again, what I found myself doing is holding the knife like this and trying to release the frame lock and not having, so I have to pull my hands back to get the frame lock to close smoothly. So really disappointed in the frame lock on this. It should have been a liner lock. With this design, there's just not enough to grab onto to deploy. And likewise, when you're trying to close it, I do this all the time. I'm sitting here like this, trying to close it. I'm like, oh my god, I'm an idiot. I got my hand on it, so I gotta kind of draw my hand back to close it. So for a defensive knife, I don't like the idea of having to put that much thought into opening and closing this thing. This thing should be a breeze. With any defensive orientated knife, you should, you know, deployment should be super, super easy, but in this knife, it's not. You got the wave opening, that's brainless. Just poof, yank it and pull, you got it. When it comes to using the disc and closing it, you know, you have to be very cognizant of where your hands are. You have to be very cognizant of your grip. And with this stainless steel, which is kind of slippery, it can make it a little more interesting. I really felt that the G10 should have been on this side and the stainless on this side, because really, you know, in the end, you don't have as much friction there, whereas you really need it here. So that's a bit of an issue. So, alright, so this thing, as I mentioned, is super gritty. It obviously needs to be cleaned, and I don't know if you'll be able to see in here, but there is a lot of dirt and grime in there when you look in there with a flashlight. A lot of dirt and grime, so it did come pretty gritty. So I'm going to take this apart eventually when I get some time, rip it apart and clean it real good and lube it, and I'm sure that will help quite a bit. But yeah, it's just one of those things, you know, like it's one of those minor annoyances, you know, when you get a knife. Oh, and another thing, blade centering is terrible. As you can see, the knife actually literally makes contact with the side right here. So blade centering is terrible. That'll probably get better with cleaning. There's probably a bunch of grit and junk in there that's doing that. So we will clean it, probably fix it. But yeah, guys, you know, like it's a $30 knife. So I didn't expect the world of this, and I never do expect, you know, the world of a Chinese-made $30 knife. But it's not the cat's meow. As far as I'm concerned, it's you know, like I said, these Emerson designs have never really appealed to me that much, and it kind of proved the point with this, that it does have, you know, if you don't use the wave, the deployment's awkward, closing's awkward, and then it's just built, you know, obviously they didn't take the time and care to clean it, which is a shame, because, you know, there are good knives out there, like the Spyderco Tenacious, that are coming off the factory line really good, in really good shape, really clean, smooth deployment and all that, so it's not like they're not capable of it. They just didn't do it with this knife, which is really a disappointment. You know, ergonomics, it feels good in the hands, but like I said, it's too much. You really got to flick to get this thing to, really got to flick to get a smooth deployment on this, which I don't like. You should be able to just use your thumb and not have to snap your hand. But overall, if I could redesign this knife, guys, if I could, you know, put some torque bits in here, make sure that they're actually flush, that they're not sticking up. Once again, these are raised, so they can be a little tough, you know, on the hands, because they're constantly, you know, rubbing in certain spots. You know, I would make that disc, you know, if I could fix the deployment on this, fix the hardware, clean this thing up, and then change this over to a liner lock, I think this would be a beautiful knife. But as it sits, it's worth the $30, yes, but it's not, you know, the rave reviews this knife gets is not really worth it. It's good. It's good. It's worth the money. It's a good value, but it's not perfect. It's not perfect by far. So there it is. Wanted to share the CQC. But yeah, nice edge on it. Really nice edge out of the factory, though. I will give them that. So, yeah, good, but wouldn't buy it again.